I almost titled this episode, How to Get More Clients, because that's what I hear a lot. But then I remember my response, and it's how to get better clients, because you can do a lot with just a small handful of clients. But before we get into that, if you're interested in entrepreneurship in the creative industry and living your best remote work life, then subscribe to this channel and be sure to hit the notification bell so you don't miss anything, and give us a like if you enjoyed the content of today's show. All right, let's do this. So, better clients. What do we mean by that? Well, you can actually thrive with a small handful of clients that are paying you rather than just getting hundreds and hundreds of clients. Now, I mean, there's certain types of businesses where that makes sense. Like in e-commerce, for example, if you're selling like iPhone cases, you want to sell them to millions of people. But as a creative entrepreneur, sometimes that can be a little challenging. I mean, if you're selling digital downloads, then you can sell a lot of that. But if you are selling your work, like you're going out and building a logo, building a website, you can't create that quickly. And so it becomes very hard to scale that type of business to a bunch of people. What you need to do is find ways of offering a smaller number of clients more value. So instead of offering just a little bit of value to a bunch of clients, how can you offer a ton of value to just a few clients? And that's the direction that I've taken things over the years. Because, I mean, honestly, trying to land more and more clients, there's so many logos a business needs, right? You design a logo for them, they're probably good for however many years, whether the business lasts or not, whether the logo is effective and they need to pivot and change it later or whatever, but they're typically not going to come back to you again for that logo for a long time. And so there's a much longer cycle when it comes to some of these kinds of creative work. And you need to find ways of sticking with that client and helping them with multiple things simultaneously. And I actually teach how to do that in my course. I'm going to go ahead and plug my course. You go to remotecreative.io. You'll see a little snippet of what that course is all about. And I teach people how to build a profitable creative agency, essentially doing what I do. And so check that out if you're interested, but enough of that. We're going to dig into some of this material. So I want to tell you a little bit about what I do, what I've done, and some things that I think would be effective for you to try. Like if I was starting over again, or if I was giving some advice on what people should do from now, if they're starting from scratch, or maybe if you're struggling and things aren't going well for you, what would you do at this point? And I think there's some helpful advice. So keep listening. We'll dig into it. First off, I want to tell you a little bit about my story, how I got started. I am self-taught. I grew up wanting to be an illustrator, doing comic strips. I was a big fan of The Far Side, especially the greatest of all time, Bill Watterson, Calvin and Hobbes. I was fortunate to be a child when newspapers still existed and where I could get up and read Calvin and Hobbes every day in the newspaper. And I actually still have over here in my office the last two published copies of the Sunday edition of Calvin and Hobbes, and then the Saturday edition before that. His last comic strip was on Sunday. And so I cut those out of the newspaper. I've held on to them for well over 20 years. So huge fan. He inspired me so much. And my dad gets a lot of credit too, because even as young as 11, 12, around there, my dad was teaching me about entrepreneurship. Now, he owned a marine construction company. He didn't have any college education. He was a self-made man. He did everything himself, and he was a genius at just figuring things out. Very smart, very intelligent man. And he always pushed me to be successful. And he always supported me. My mom as well. My mom, my dad, my grandparents, my whole family was extremely supportive. Incredibly so. It really makes a difference when you have supportive people in your life. The problem was the lack of knowledge on how to run a business and how to actually do those things. And growing up, it was kind of like, well, you go to college, You get into college somehow. I didn't know how I was going to afford college at all. We didn't have a lot of money, and we did landscaping and marine construction. I grew up picking up dead possums and beer bottles out of ditches and cutting grass during the summer while everyone else was playing. I started working when I was 11 years old for the family business and going out, building decks, doing hard labor, like really hard labor all throughout my childhood, which was really good for me. It taught me good work ethic. And as much as I hate it, I appreciate my dad for teaching me how to work hard, even though I wasn't always super excited about it. Right. But anyway, where does that lead? So as a kid, I'm actually doing logos for businesses. My dad goes, make some business cards. We're going to a trade show. And so I'm going around handing my business cards. I'm doing little demos. I'm sitting down at some people that are selling computers, and I'm in the paint programs, like drawing characters and stuff. They were really impressed by that. And so I did get customers and clients. I did actually do logos for legitimate businesses as a teenager, which was kind of fun. It was cool to see your work out there in the world, but I never had internet access growing up as a kid. Even my teenagers, the first time I used the internet, I was like 21 years old, which was in, I think, 2021. I was a little late to the game, so to speak. What ended up happening is I got to the point where I was still working, doing construction, still doing hard labor. It was really, really hard. I had no opportunities. I had no money for college. I had nothing. I didn't know how I was going to get out of that. And so I had an opportunity come along where I worked at a telephone directory doing these little single space ads. It was the best I can do, but it got me out of the hot sun. And I was now sitting behind a computer. And even though I was doing these boring single space ads that were just all text, I tried to bring as much of my own kind of personality and skill into that process to make those single space ads as nice looking as possible. And so I made the best of what I had. I mean, that's all I had at the time. And I wanted to outwork anyone else that was there too, because I knew how to work hard. So that wasn't an issue. And so I was producing single space ads. I was doing like 40 a day. Whereas before there were two people doing what I did, and they only did 20 a day between the two of them. So I was doing double the work that two people were doing before, and they really appreciated that. I end up leaving the phone book. I start a business, and by this time I had registered for some Pell Grants to try to go to college, and I studied business administration, just an associate's degree. But honestly, I felt like that was a huge waste of my time, because during that time, I had actually helped start 3 businesses during the time I was in there. And it was a massive distraction. It was using all my gas money to get there. And I had nothing in my bank account. I get married during this time. My wife, who is a saint to this very day, she married me when I was nothing and I had nothing. And she was willing to go on that journey with me, which is amazing. And I'm always grateful to her for taking that leap and believing in me as well and trusting me. We went off, started our life. I'm still going back. I'm working construction still, going back to at least something that brought in money. We delivered phone books during Christmas. I sold vacuums for a little bit. And the one thing, here's what changed. And call it divine intervention, call it luck, call it whatever you want. But I was sitting at my desk. I had decided not to sell vacuums anymore because I didn't like the way they ran their business. It was super sketchy. That's a whole other story. But I'm back at my apartment and I'm sitting in front of my computer for like 3 days. And I have no idea what to do. And I'm just starting to think about where my life is going. And I'm having a bit of a crisis. Just, I'm looking, I'm searching, I'm trying everything I can. And nothing's working. And it's really frustrating because when you don't know what the future looks like for you, it feels hopeless. And I just wish, like I look at where I am today and I wish I could go back in time to that poor kid sitting at that desk all discouraged and say, man, hang in there. Just hang in there a little longer. Just keep going. There are amazing things ahead of you. You have no idea. So I challenge you to do that right now. Think of your current situation. If you are feeling hopeless, if you're feeling like the future is fuzzy and dark and that you have no idea what's out there or how you're going to get anywhere, I want you to think of yourself in the future, completely successful, at that place where all of your hopes and dreams have actually come to pass. And I want you to listen to your future self. What would your future self say? And listen to your future self. Your future self would tell you to go on, to dig in, to keep searching, and to be persistent, and find some strength in that, because I'm there. I got there. And I mean it when I say I literally came from practically nothing. I didn't have any prospects or any opportunities. And one of the things that inspired me was I was listening to the radio while I was driving my truck with like $17 in my bank account to a early morning college class. And I was listening to this story of this guy who came to the United States. He snuck in a tractor tire and he became a multimillionaire. And he didn't know the language or anything. He had to start from way worse of a situation than I was in. So like, man, if he could do it, if he could succeed, then I can too. I hear a lot of people bad-mouthing the American dream. I mean, people badmouth everything. You can say you love cute little puppies and somebody will find something wrong with that. But the American dream is real, and it's really the human dream. It's the dream that you can become something greater than you are, that you can evolve and that you can become something. That doesn't mean everyone's going to be a billionaire. I don't know that you want to be a billionaire. Does that make you happier? I mean, even being a multimillionaire, does that make you happier? I think happiness comes from something else. It doesn't come from profit and money. It's good to achieve those things, I think. Those are great goals. I mean, when you make more money, you can hire more people, you can expand opportunity, but what makes you happy has to come from somewhere else, something deep down. So here's what happened. As I was sitting at that desk, I noticed some of my drawings, some of my sketches, and there were these characters that I created. I would just draw all kinds of crazy characters. And I said, you know what? I'm going to scan those into my computer, and I'm just going to open them up in Illustrator, and I'm going to trace them and color them. And so I did that. I did that with 8 heads of different characters, and they were all slightly different. I'd used iStock Photo at the time, which was, I mean, they're still a huge company, but they were big even way back then, like 20 years ago. And I decided I was going to upload some of my artwork to iStock Photo and sell it and make royalties off of it. I was like, well, yeah, if I could make some royalties off these drawings and keep uploading some illustrations. So that was the plan. I was like, okay, that's more of a long-term plan. It's not going to solve my problem now, but I might as well get started on something. Do something rather than just sit here. And so I uploaded them and I dusted my hands and said, all right, cool. I did that. I woke up the next morning and I got an email and it said that they made me Artist of the Week. And I go to the iStock Photo homepage, like the main homepage of the website, and right there is one of my designs in a little section called Artist of the Week. Now, they don't have that anymore, but they did at the time. And that single thing changed my life. They said, you got to check this guy's portfolio out. He's only uploaded 8 illustrations, but keep your eye on this person, etc. And this was back in the day where the whole vector style was still new. And so my particular style of design was very different and people loved it. And something happened that I did not foresee. And that was, I did make royalties off the work, but I only ever uploaded 23 illustrations into iStock. I could have done more. Thing is I got so busy doing other work that I didn't have time to upload more artwork to iStock. I could have, I should have. That was one slight regret that I have. However, I started getting contacted almost immediately by people all over the world, from Australia to Qatar to the UK, Canada, and Las Vegas. And I'm interacting with all these different people, and they said, hey, we really like your illustrations. Can you do an illustration in that style for me? And so I was taking custom jobs from all these different people who were messaging me through iStock's system. And it became a lead generation source. And so there I was with nothing. And in one day, I'm getting bombarded. And it pretty much stayed that way perpetually to this day. And that's a crazy story, but that actually happened. The internet made that possible, just getting out there. When you look at how it was back then to how it is today, obviously it's much more of a crowded space. But within all of that mess, there are still massive opportunities. I would say there's even more opportunities, far more than when I was starting out. But what happened is I still decided I was going to try to market. I spent some time creating flyers and handouts and different things to try to do the traditional marketing stuff, but I never used it. I was always getting so much word of mouth. It became clear to me, well, if word of mouth is what's driving my business, what can I do to increase word of mouth? And so did I ask for referrals? Sometimes. I didn't really need to, though. My initial strategy, and I learned this from my dad, is you always do your best work. So whenever we were building decks and there was a piece of wood that was cut in a certain way and we put it in there, but it wasn't quite straight. It was slightly off. You know, you could say the owner of the house is not going to notice. Nobody's going to notice. It's a little thing. That wasn't good enough for my dad. We'd pull it up, we'd redo it, and we'd put it in. Everything was precision. And I think he became known as the main guy that you go to. Every time there's a problem to solve or a complex task, they would always come to my dad. This guy without a college education, had no engineering background, but he learned everything. He learned all the codes. He learned how to build stuff properly. And he did phenomenal work. And so I carried that over to my clients. I made sure that everything I did was excellent. I would never let bad work with my name on it go out into the world. And so I took that to heart, and that's what I did with each of my clients, and what they noticed, and they appreciated it. And so the thing about creative work is it's very visual, at least the type of work I do. There's music and other types of creative work as well. But visual design is something that you absolutely connect with, and you know good stuff when you see it. It's right there in front of you. So when you're designing a logo, for example, and then a person puts it on their shirts, they put the sign on their building, they do everything. They're like, that's an amazing logo. Where did you get it done? I use this person, and I highly recommend you use them as well. If it's a business card or a website or whatever, the stuff you're doing for clients, that's your marketing material. It's promoting you. So if you do really exceptional work and you make that client a raving fan, an advocate, then they will send other people to you. They will tell everyone about you. And I really think that this particular type of business is just ripe for generating this kind of work where word of mouth could pretty much carry you perpetually. And so that's how I started out, and that's how it's continued up to this day. Now, you may find yourself in a situation where you're just starting out, or maybe I've even talked to people who've been in this business for longer than I have that are still struggling along. So what do you do? And this is a little bit of a process. There's so much to it. That's why I built a course teaching people about this. There's a lot, but I'll try to give you what I can, what I would recommend doing if you're stuck in a certain situation. The first thing is you have to find ways of offering more value to your clients. And it used to be just me alone. And today I run and own my own business. Vector is my company, and I don't have any partners in Vector. I did invite partners in on at least one occasion back in the day, and that was a huge mistake, and I'll never do it again. But that's a conversation for another time. There's reasons why. But a single person has their limits. You can only know so much. You can only have so much skill. And I spent so many years trying to develop broad skills across all these different levels, but I think that was a mistake on my part. Now, yeah, I can do tons of stuff today and it's great, but unfortunately that keeps you stuck behind the desk, and it also limits what you can provide to your clients, because no one person can know everything or do everything exceptionally well. And so what I do is I multiply my value by bringing people with different skill sets to the table. And so I have a network of professionals that I reach out to, and where somebody has a specific skill set, I bring them into the project. That way, the total output, the results are going to be as good as possible. So if someone can do something better than me, I bring them in and we collaborate and work together. But yeah, to this day, everything's just word of mouth. People send me an email, we set up a Zoom call, we go from there. And I do Zoom calls with everyone, even if we're in the same city or even if we live just miles apart. I typically don't meet in person, not because I don't like to meet in person. I just think when you do a Zoom call, I can have access to my entire screen, and I'm booking all my appointments on Calendly. Someone will contact me and say, hey, I'd like to talk to you about this or that. And I'll just say, all right, here's my Calendly link. Pick a time and a date that work for you. And they do. And then in that process, it says, do you want to do a phone call or a Zoom call? Pretty much everyone picks Zoom call. So we get in Zoom, I share my screen, and then I can show them all kinds of things and take them through a process. And I can also, if I know a little bit about what they wanted from that initial call, if I have examples of things I want to show them, I can open up a bunch of tabs in a browser and then walk them through those tabs and make it a very dynamic experience. And honestly, it makes it so easy to sell what I do, because it helps paint that dream outcome for the customer and give them an idea of where you could potentially take them. But starting from zero can be very hard. No matter how long you've been trying, you may have been at this for years and still feel like you're at zero, like you're barely scraping by. There's a lot of people that are making, less than $1,000 a month doing design work. I don't know how people are surviving out there. Some people are obviously staying with relatives who are trying to help and support them, but there's a lot you can do to market yourself and start getting out there. The key, and if you're an introvert like I am, I hated this word for a long time. It's networking, which involves people. And people can be a challenge to me sometimes. Like I've said, I love people. I like people a lot. It's just I get burned out from people very fast. And I mean, that's something I've been working to overcome. And I feel like I've made some great steps in that arena, especially I think over this last year. I'm always trying new things in trying to meet with people, but let's talk about that for a minute. So network, I think it begins with family. So start with family. Start with your friends, friends of friends, acquaintances. Then you've got like meetups, masterminds, and then groups. So it goes from very personal and intimate all the way out to strangers and new acquaintances you have to meet. And that can be very hard for introverted people. And I know there's a lot of introverts in the creative industry. There's a lot of extroverts as well. But I think it's especially hard for the introverts. The introverts, a lot of them don't like confrontation. They have problems giving higher prices to their clients. They undervalue themselves. There's a lot of mindset problems that have to be overcome. But the key thing is, and the advice I always give people is, you got to tell people what you do and be very open and clear and obvious about it, and build and nurture relationships. You want to spread yourself as wide as possible and be ubiquitous. And again, for an introvert, that can be hard to do, but there are ways you can do it. And so one of the ways I do it, you see my hat here, brand or die. I actually print my own swag. I've got a Remote Creative shirt right here, and I'll print my own swag, and I'll wear my own messaging that tells people what I do. That way, when I even am walking into a store, going to an event, meeting with family and friends, it's an icebreaker thing. People are like, what does that mean? Like, oh, let me tell you a little about it. This is what I do. And so it helps give you, and I think having that crutch, and I don't mean crutch in a bad way, I mean it in a productive way. If you got a bad leg, or you broke your leg, or you sprained your ankle and you need a crutch, that crutch is a lifesaver. You know, it's not a bad thing. People are always like, oh, I don't need a crutch. Like, sometimes you do need a crutch. There's nothing wrong with a crutch if you need one. That's why you have crutches. I mean, until one day you don't need it anymore, but you may need it for a long time. You know, you may need it for life, but use the crutch, for crying out loud. If there's something there that can help you be successful, by all means, use it, right? So this is one of the things that I like to do. I get this stuff made from printful.com, and I order them, and I can really easily create my own swag. I've got B3T framework. That's what my business uses. It's a brand strategy framework, but I try to be ubiquitous. I try to be everywhere. I try to make sure I'm everywhere and people understand what I do and the value that I bring. That way, when they run into a point in life where they have a problem, or they know someone that has a problem, and they start thinking of solutions, it's triggering it in their mind, they think of me. And I want them to think of me before they think of anybody else. So I just go out, I live who I am. I discuss when people are like, hey, Steve, how you doing? Oh, I just started this new course recently, or I developed this new framework, or I've been studying these new branding techniques. Then you open up the conversation to those types of things. You know, if you're going to ask somebody, how are you doing? And that's pretty much what everyone says. I'm sorry, you asked the question, so I'm going to tell you how I'm doing and what I'm doing, right? I don't care if people are like, man, every time I talk to Steve, he talks to me about branding. So be it. You know, that's what I'm all about. And that doesn't mean I don't talk about anything else, but if you're going to come up and say what's new or how's it going, I'm going to lead with that. And then we'll switch the conversation to something else, but you're going to be reminded. You're going to get reminded. One of the things that I found very helpful as well is Russell Brunson's challenge. He's a bit ubiquitous as well. I guarantee you've probably seen something from him online somewhere. He does a really good job at this, but I've read some of his books. Expert Secrets is really good. But here's what he says. I challenge you to publish daily for at least a year, because that's the way to find your voice and allow your audience to find you. Think about that. I challenge you to post daily for at least a year. Now, who's got the discipline to do that? I think a lot of people do, and I don't think discipline's the problem. It's knowing what the heck to post daily. That's the problem. How can you post daily? I struggle with that for a long time. Like, I couldn't figure out how to do that. How do you generate so much content? I did find a solution, and there's variations of this that I think you can do too. But I've seen guys like Alex Hormozi say the same thing, and you can tell that he takes it seriously, especially in this last year. But there you go. I've taken notice. I've noticed he's been posting daily, and he talks about that too. But the key, or the secret, appears to be creating some type of long form content that you can then convert into multiple pieces of short form content. And so you'll see people do this. You'll see like a little snippet where someone's dropping little pearls of wisdom, and then you'll see several of those pop up. But you may not realize that those were actually part of a longer podcast, right? So the way I do it is I create one piece of long form content in the form of a podcast, this very podcast that you're listening to. And while I say I don't do any marketing for Vector, that's true. This podcast actually exists so I can promote my course. And I do ultimately have a greater vision of not just selling courses. I do want to help other creatives. I do want to be a source of information that I wish I would have had when I was starting. Because I felt like when I was starting up, there are positions that exist today, like UX director, all these different types of things that didn't exist when I started. I mean, there's a lot of things in this industry that are brand new. It was a different world back then. There were just graphic designers and designers. There wasn't a lot of this strategy in play, at least not as widely known and talked about as it is today, available to the common person. It used to be you got these big marketing agencies with their own methodologies and things like this. And these were highly guarded secrets way up at the top that you weren't really going to get access to without spending tons of money going through the college system and into the industry. Nowadays, all that stuff is distilled down to where everyone can access it, right? It's an amazing time to live in. Circling back, you got your one piece of long form content. From this video, I can extract quotes of things that I've said, put them in a template and write out the quote, share it as an image. I can also take a recording of this through Descript, which is what I use to record my podcasts. And I can create audiograms, which you've probably seen in my Instagram feed, where it'll just be words going by and you're following along with the words, and there's a little audio pattern and it's just audio. And then you'll see video clips from this actual show. And then I post stuff from my portfolio. I post occasionally things just from life, me going places and doing things, living a remote work life. I make sure that that theme is present in everything that I post, that some of those aspects of that theme are there. And I'm able to schedule my posts. So I create one piece of long form content and then schedule those posts out. And I usually do it Thursday morning. So this is being recorded on Thursday morning. I'll simply record the show, very easily edit it in Descript. It doesn't take very long. I'll export it. I'll upload it to my YouTube channel. I'll schedule it, and then I'll upload it to anchor.fm. I'll schedule that. So everything's scheduled, and then I go back to my content, and then I'll just cut out some audiograms. I'll cut some video clips, and I'll just export them, and I'll put them in a big folder. And then I just simply go into the social media manager, and I'll just say, all right, schedule that one, schedule that one, schedule that one. And I'll schedule the whole week out, and then boom, I'm done. And I got all done on a Thursday morning. And so it's really handy to have all these tools at your disposal. And now I can post daily to my Instagram feed, very valuable content, and see what engages people. I can see which types of content people are engaging with, and then try to produce more of that kind of content so that the audience is getting information that is valuable to them. And so this is how I'm doing it. And I'm doing it by sharing information freely that I think would be of value to the community. And that goes to one of my sayings, is that the unaware never care. And that's really important. I want you to think about that for a minute. The unaware never care. The unaware will never be interested. If they are never interested, they will never have a desire for what you do. And if they never have a desire for what you do, then they'll never take action. And if they don't take action, there never will be an exchange of value. So you have to create awareness, and that'll always involve some kind of experimentation. So you need to go out there and experiment. You need to go out and try to create that awareness. And now some of the things I'd mentioned before, family, friends, friends of friends, it's okay to reach out to family and friends and say, hey, I'm trying some new things. I've started a new business, or I'm pivoting my business and I'm looking for new clients. I'm willing to offer a finder's fee if you send someone my way and send me a referral. And so attaching a little finder's fee could bring some value to somebody, to bring up your name in a place where they might not have thought to before. But I think there are also groups out there that can be very valuable, like meetup.com, I think is a wonderful resource. There are Facebook groups as well that you can get involved with, like mastermind groups, business networking groups. Some of these you can go and join and be the design person or the branding agency that they want to have as part of the group, so that they can get information from you. And then you may capture all of those people as clients, or at least a significant portion of them. When I first moved back to Austin about 6 years ago, for another project I was working on, I was looking for developers and other designers and things. And I decided I was going to go to some meetup groups. And so I joined some of these groups and went to some presentations. So there were presentations being given, and they were really fun opportunities. There was, and I think I've talked about this before in a previous podcast, but someone will present on a certain thing, and then you have snacks afterwards and people mingle and you're wearing name tags. You can actually meet quite a few interesting people in there that could turn into clients. It gives you an opportunity to talk about what you do, and setting aside time during the week to go to a meetup event like that, you can just mark that off as marketing efforts. Think how much time you may spend now doing marketing stuff. And you may need to do a lot of it in the beginning if you don't have the work, but don't just sit around doing nothing. Like, try something, create some content like this, or go out and network, go to some meetup groups, join some on Facebook, look for groups that have events that you can attend. And if there aren't any events near you, go into these Facebook groups and look at what people are talking about. Look at the problems people are having, and then offer them suggestions. Try to bring some of your expertise to the table and say, hey, have you tried this yet? Or what have you thought about XYZ? And now as an expert, you're weighing in on, you're joining these conversations. And at that point, they may say, that's a really good idea. I've actually researched that. I want to do it. I don't know how. Could we set up a time to talk? I'd love to talk to you more about that. And then boom, there you go. Now you can sit down, have a discussion, talk about your value. You just got a new client. And you could do that over and over and over again. But again, the unaware never care. So the only way to make the unaware care is to make them aware, right? I mean, this isn't rocket science, but you have to be able to put yourself out there at some point. And you may feel like you're doing that right now. Like, I don't know what everyone's individual situation is like. And some people have a lot of work, but they're just not making a ton of money because they're undervaluing themselves. They're not charging enough, and they're selling services that just frankly aren't profitable. And selling things like logos, graphic design, websites, those can be profitable if you're charging high enough prices. But often the problem isn't that your prices are too low. It's that there are more higher value services that you could sell that will make those products and services actually better. And that's basically what I've discovered along the way, because I was stuck. I was a starving artist for years and years. And I didn't know how to raise my prices. And it's kind of like one of the examples I like to use is, if you're selling gasoline and all of a sudden you say, well, I want to make more money off gasoline, so I'm going to double the price of the gasoline. Nobody's going to buy that from you. Like, if you went out and there were 5 gas stations and one gas station was double the price, would anybody buy that gas? No, probably not. Why? Well, what's the difference in that gas to where it's $2 more? Well, there's no difference. So you're going to pay a higher price for something that's the same as everything else. And if all you're doing is selling logos, websites, and graphic design, there are freelancers all over the place. Fiverr, Upwork, freelancer.com. And people can go and buy those services for, pennies on the dollar. So why are they going to pay you more? Maybe because they know you or they trust you. And that's true. They may pay you more just because of that. Plus the convenience level, you're right there. They feel like they can get better work, and they may be a little suspicious of the super cheap people. But again, they're not going to accept the price that's that much higher. So what do? What I found is I need to be able to offer people more value than just a logo, just a website, because I see a lot of this stuff getting made, but oftentimes it misses the mark. Actually, a lot of times it does. Simply good design alone isn't necessarily good enough, especially if it's not connecting with the target audience. More especially if you don't really know who the target audience is. It hasn't been very well defined, or that the business is going after the wrong target audience. The audience is too broad, or there's a more profitable niche they could be in that they're not in. And the design work, while good, actually misses that audience and feels like it belongs to another one. So the actual audience you're aiming at doesn't feel like that's for them. And I see this happening again and again. And the problem is if, the logo is wrong or the identity is wrong, then when people go to build the website, do the social media, or create the ads, they're going off of all this wrong information. So everything else after that becomes wrong. And it's just missing the target audience all over the place. It's like playing pin the tail on the donkey. That's one of my favorite analogies. It's the difference between playing pin the tail on the donkey or a precision archer with an expensive compound bow who sees the target and is aiming right at it? And which do you want to be? And so I have found that solving that problem for my clients has been very profitable to my business because I offer far more than just the design work. It's the strategic thinking behind it. Anyway, that's been the biggest game changer for me, to allow me to work with a smaller group of clients that I bring a higher level of value to. And that to me has been a massive game changer instead of just trying to get more clients. The answer is better clients. And so if you're interested in learning more about that, go to remotecreative.io and you can start on the path of seeing if the solutions I have in terms of my course and the Remote Creative community and network are going to be of any value to you. It takes a lot of time. It took me years and years and years of doing things, but hopefully there's something in today's podcast that inspires some things that you can try. Whether you're a creative professional or even if you are somebody that uses creative services, one of the things I would point out is, yes, it can be valuable to hire individual people, like an individual logo designer, individual website designer. But really, I think it's going to cost more to work with an agency, but the value that an agency can bring to the table is going to be the strategic overall vision of how to get you from point A to point B. Whereas if you just hire a logo designer or a website designer and a guy designs some ads or something like that, it can start to become very disjointed. You have all these other people involved, but there's no cohesive overall vision at play. An agency is going to be able to bring all of that together under a strategy and deliver you consistent results. And so, yes, you may think you're going to save money by hiring people out individually, but you're also going to waste money if none of that is cohesive and consistent. Because what's going to happen is you're going to notice as time goes by, it's not connecting with your audience. You're not making the profits that your company needs to make because you don't have that connection. That communication's not really happening. Your branding is completely missing its mark. There's no strategy there. You can make serious mistakes that could cost you business as well. And so then you're going to have to go, well, maybe I need to redo everything. So you'll pay money to redo a lot of it. But even then, you could be making the same mistakes again, just with different design. And then, you're reprinting shirts, reprinting vehicle graphics, redoing signs. It's expensive. Yeah. Does it cost a little bit more to go with an agency? Yes, it does. But if there's a strategy there and it's dialed in, it's actually going to save you money in the long run because your business is going to perform better. You're going to connect with your audience better. And then your profits are going to increase. If you don't go down that route, then you risk leaving all this money on the table. And that's what I like to call the high cost of not moving forward with a strategic plan, because there is a cost. There's a cost to paying for services, of course, right? I look at it as more an investment, because investment will make you more money in the long run than it initially cost you. But there is a cost to not going down that route. And you will end up paying that cost in missed profits, in missing connecting with your audience, and potentially losing your business and creating a massive failure. Now, you will hopefully learn something from that failure and maybe do better on the next time around. But why risk not taking a strategic step forward? Hopefully, there's some value in today's show for each and every one of you out there. And if you liked the show today, high five that like button, hit subscribe if you haven't, tap that notification bell so you don't miss anything. If you want to listen on the go, check out anchor.fm/remote creative or Apple or Spotify podcasts. We're up on there as well. But that is it for today's show. So get out there and create some greatness.